Hi, LaPonda.
Hi, Greg. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'd like to welcome you and welcome everyone. I'm Gregg Ward, Executive Director of the Center for Respectful Leadership. Welcome to our Changemaker Spotlight series, where we interview amazing thought leaders who are standing directly at the intersection of respect and leadership. Today, we are talking with LaPonda Fitchpatrick, who is a member of the Center's esteemed Advisory Council. Welcome, LaPonda. We are really excited to have you with us today.
Thank you so much, Greg, for having me. I really appreciate it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Now, before we start, everybody, you need to know that LaPonda spent 31 years with the Los Angeles Airport Police Department, where she oversaw everything from security to training to hiring and even mentoring new and emerging officers. We are so fortunate to have her with us on the Center's Advisory Council, because she brings such a wealth of knowledge and experience from what we can all agree is a typically formal, regimented, and high-stress line of work. But despite that experience and intensity of her work, LaPonda is one of the most infectiously upbeat people we know. LaPonda, what keeps you so positive?
Well, first of all, Greg, I am extremely blessed. I am actually blessed to be here. In 1993, I suffered a tremendous injury, an illness that almost took my life. And so from that day forward, I realized that every day you have to make a difference because it's not promised to you. Secondly, I love people. When I worked at LAX, I had 10 bad days in 31 years, and I can count them on these little fingers, because it was a blessing to serve the people. It was a blessing to serve my officers and my superiors.
Wow.
So I am just glad to be here. I am a blessed person, and I don't take any day for granted anymore.
Thank you. So, you know what? I feel the same way. Thank you so much for saying that. You just infect us all with your upbeat and positive, and you're just terrific. So I wanted to—
Thank you.
You're welcome. I wanted to dive into the concept of respect. And when you think about respect in context of your work and career in law enforcement, what does it mean to you?
You know, respect really means providing people with the tools that they need to do the job they've been tasked with, which includes respect and agency as a part of their toolkit.
Okay. And so when you think about the respect that you were given or not, how did it feel to you? How did it land with you?
You know, one of the things that I always tried to instill in managers and supervisors that worked under me, as well as my superiors and myself, is that without subordinates, without our followers, we don't have a job. We have to understand that they are the reason why we are where we are, and they deserve our respect before we earn theirs. You know, our job is to empower our employees, not the opposite way around. And we get that confused quite frequently. The environment can change very quickly, but respect should never change, no matter what that pressures on you may be.
That makes a lot of sense.
It really, really does, because the biggest way you can support your subordinates is through creating continuing education. That is one of the key areas that sometimes we let go when financial pressures become upon us. Any job requirement that has been put into writing needs to have a training management system behind it.
So when you think back, I know you had to deal with some pretty powerful people out at LAX, CEOs of airlines, visiting heads of state, and all that kind of fun stuff. Is there a time where you felt that you met a leader who actually understood what you were talking about treating subordinates with respect? Do you recall anyone who really met that standard?
I do. And he was my mentor throughout my career. And unfortunately, he passed away from a job-related illness. But it was Captain Gary Green. You know, he taught me that we work with everyone, you know, from CEOs and, as you said, heads of state. But he also told me that one of the things that we frequently forget as leaders is in a rush, because you remember airlines and airports are in a rush to transport people and goods, is that every person has a role in our success. We cannot do it by ourselves. And that includes the CEOs and the custodians. For example, we are always looking for suspicious or misplaced items or looking for people that have lost things. I had to know the rhythm of my airport to know what was out of place. Often the most informative people I came across in this mission were the airport custodians. They were this invisible population who saw and overheard everything, but nobody saw and overheard them. And frequently they were mistreated while they were trying to do their job.
Right.
And they were documenting what and where everything was happening in the airport. And then we know cleanliness and appeal was extremely important, and airports really do value J.D. Power rankings. And think about how important our custodial staff is right now in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Wow, that is incredible insight. You know, I'll be honest, I didn't really think about it that way. I always try when I'm in an airport or when I'm in any kind of busy travel situation, I try to treat the people who work there, no matter what their job is, I try to treat them with respect, because my experience of the traveling public, no matter, and I've lived and traveled all over Europe and the Middle East and the United States, I find the traveling public can sometimes be a little disrespectful to the staff, whether it's security staff or custodial staff. And so I always try to go out of my way to be nice and pleasant and friendly with them, because why not, right? Why not?
Absolutely. I mean, say hello, say
Yeah.
thank you. Those are two of the easiest things that you can do that don't take any time out of your day. And to be completely clear, you know, our airports couldn't function or compete without our custodial staff and everyone else that we work with there. So for me, they were always a priority in any of the emergency management scenarios that I created, in our security program, and in our emergency response. They were as important, if not more, than the CEO.
And did you have to implement those plans on occasion?
Absolutely. Having been the incident commander for the July 4th, 2004 shooting at the El Al ticket counter,
Yes.
as well as responding to airplane incidences and crashes, as well as, you know, we always have the bomb threat or a false active shooting. Yes. And they were very, very critical to our security posture.
I'm betting, sorry to interrupt you. I'm betting that because you treated them, and I assume as the leader, your respectful behaviors also were picked up by your staff, that because you all treated those custodial staff with respect, they stepped up in those emergency situations. I'll bet you they did.
Yes, they did. And they appreciated the fact that my staff included them in trainings, went and talked to them at briefings, took their sage advice when they were responding to something that the custodial staff may have found. And I know we're focusing on custodians because of the simple fact that they are this invisible army that keeps everything running. And so if we can respect the least, the ones that we feel that we have designated as the least in our organization, imagine how we can treat the people that we provide services to. Because remember, respect does not remain in your organization. It is outward facing to your customers and your clients.
Right, right. We have found, all of our research tells us that if you respect the least among your team, they will transfer that respect not only back to you, but to your customers, to your third-party vendors, to the community itself, to the fact that they would walk off the premises and see some scraps of paper or soda cans lying on the ground.
Right.
They will bend over and pick them up, even though they're not on the job. It is an amazing transformation that occurs when people are treated with respect. So when you think about the work you're doing now, tell us a little about the work that you're doing now and how you're having a positive impact.
Well, I am now, after 31 phenomenal years, I still do significant amounts of training in the aviation space. But in my last years of my career, I really became very interested in how people are treated in the workplace. And that includes how we manage gender and race relations, how we manage our unconscious bias. It's one of the reasons why I have to remind myself that we are our brain. A lot of times we are, a big part of us is our heart, but our brain leads us down paths that we may not realize that we're going. So I'm always working with organizations to create a culture of diversity, equity, inclusion, but also social justice as well. And so I provide consulting services in the human resources realm, and I have just met phenomenal people. That's how I met you so many years ago. And I still consider you my first instructor in this space and my first mentor.
Thank you. You are very kind. Tell us a little bit more. I love the graphic behind your head. Tell us a little bit more. I know we're going far afield here, but that's what these conversations are all about. So you mentioned unconscious bias. How does it all play out in the brain? I'm noticing that graphic behind you. It's really cool. So tell us a little more.
You know, with all of our technologies, with all of our knowledge, with our global community, we are still just cave people. 75% of our brain is our ancient brain. And so it is where we make the majority of our decisions. It's our fight, our flight, our freeze, our assess. And so in order to make sense of 11 million pieces of information that comes into our brains at any given second, where we can only process 40, we put people and things in categories. It lets us operate in the real world. So take it for example, if you had to get up in the morning and you had to think about every step you had to take, you had to wake up, you had to shake your head, you had to stretch, if you had to think about everything, you would not get out of the bed. And so what we do is the brain learns things and puts them in category. Is this good for me? Is this safe for me? Or is this a threat for me? Is this like me? Or is this different from me? And so when it does that, it doesn't always take time to get to know what it is processing. And so that's where unconscious bias and what we label less than takes over. And we don't take time to open the book. We just look at the cover and we will sort it into categories. If it's of interest to us, we will then engage more. But if we believe that it's not, or it's not like us, we'll just pass on it. And oftentimes we see this, especially in onboarding processes and hiring. You know, we all know, or most of us know, the experiment with ethnic sounding names versus names that we would consider Eurocentric here in the United States, and how there was over a 50% difference in engagement just based on a name. If your name was more ethnic, you didn't get a call back. If your name was Jane or Mary or John, you got callbacks almost 50% of the time. And so with that, and using respect is taking time to get to know that person, not what group that person belongs to, although that is important as you engage with them further down the road. But open the book, read them, learn about them, understand them. That is really what respect is all about. You cannot, yeah.
I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead. I'm sorry.
So I was doing some research. It's so interesting you bring respect up in that context, because I was doing some research of where it came from. The word respect actually comes from the Latin, and the original Latin word is respectus, us, respectus, which
Yes.
means literally to look back at, to re-regard, to reconsider, to have a new perspective. Isn't that interesting?
It is. And again, it's like we do, because remember, you do have to re-engage. So your brain has put people in categories and you make these assumptions. Oftentimes, especially with unconscious bias, your assumptions may be what you may not ordinarily express had you engaged that thinking brain, this front portion of your brain. And so ultimately, you can't be successful without those contributions by others that you may view as less important because they're not in your prime categories.
Right. So
You have to be mindful to move them into those categories.
all right, let's talk about those folks who are not the custodial staff at LAX, but elsewhere, who are feeling undervalued, who are feeling disrespected. What all of our research and experience tells us that people who are feeling undervalued and disrespected have more challenges at work, more absenteeism, or something that's called presenteeism, where they just show up and they barely work, or there are more complaints or revolving door, et cetera, et cetera. What advice would you give today in this challenging environment where people feel lucky to have a job, yet they don't feel respected? What advice would you give those undervalued, disrespected folks?
I would tell them, show up. Show up every day and do your best. The person, your manager, or your direct report may not see you as value, but someone does. Your work is not always for your immediate supervisor. It is for the people that you serve. A lot of times in organizations, we forget that a lot of our customers are internal to us. They're our subordinates, they're our superiors, they are our peers. And so although we may not always feel respected, we must continue to show up with a respectful countenance, because it is catchy. That person in front of you at this time, people are really afraid to speak up. It is one of the things that we have included in our pulse surveys for employees. Do you feel comfortable addressing your manager if you have a situation that you cannot resolve or you feel uncomfortable? And what we have found is absolutely what you're saying. People are afraid to speak up, but we know that when they get that Likert scale, that 5-point scale, or that satisfied or very satisfied, neutral, dissatisfied, what have you, look for the people that say neutral, because everybody should care. Those are the folks that you really want to talk to, because they're the ones that are really having a lot more issues than the people that can voice themselves. But I can tell you, don't allow yourself to be disrespected or mistreated. Go to your human resources manager, who should have reached out to you already anyway during this pandemic, to see if you have the tools that are necessary to get your job done.
Got it.
But you come with respect and demand it when it's not given to you in any situation.
That can be quite scary when you're not being treated
Yes.
with respect by your bosses. You're worried that if you stand up for yourself, they'll say, okay, you're gone. Because in this environment, the fear is that there's so much crisis at the top of many organizations that any excuse to cut people is a good one in terms of saving money. So I think a lot of people, unfortunately, are very fearful in this environment. So given that that's a reality, what advice if you've got a leader or a manager, and understandably, I've coached quite a few myself, I'm sure you have too, who is really stressed out right now about whether or not the organization's going to survive what's been going on in the world. What would you say to them if they said to you, LaPonda, help? I don't know what to do. I'm getting pressure from leadership to cut costs, and I've just got to hammer on my people to get the job done. What do I do? If they're at least open to you, what would you say to them, LaPonda?
The first thing that I'm going to tell them is to take a step back and breathe.
Good advice.
Take that breath. I wake up every morning with a breath. I wake up, I do my yoga, whether it's an hour or 10 minutes. It gets me centered. So I'm going to give them the same advice I give myself. First of all, take a step back and take a breath. And then second of all, and one thing that we probably haven't forgotten here is that there is a hierarchy of need. Irregardless, or regardless, as I was once corrected, regardless, I will never forget that correction. Regardless, I will never forget that correction. It's very interesting, and we'll have to talk about that story a little later. But regardless of how tenuous our situations are, there's always a hierarchy of need. And so I would tell the leaders to take a step back and really put in place your hierarchy of need. What you need from your managers and superiors to get your job done, and how you want to go about doing that. You can't do everything at once. Although we want to, what happens is that you get a lot of bad things done poorly that have to be redone. And so if you do put that hierarchy of need in place and you put it down on paper and either computer or writing, whichever you prefer to do. I am a journaler, so I love my journals. So I like to write it out first. It gives you time to take a break. It really starts to allow you to breathe. And as you're writing it down, you're thinking about it, but you're not pointing fingers at other people. You're being introspective about what you need to do. And then once you have that in place, that list, that hierarchy of need, and a space, don't forget, because there's always going to be emergencies, a space on how to deal with the inevitable emergency that's going to come into place. Now you can build a system around you to start speaking to your subordinates. Hi, this is what we have to do. It's due by XYZ. I need ABCD employee to come. Let's have this meeting. Give that to them and then monitor it. We cannot forget our basic leadership skills and our basic project management requirements. It's more important now than ever. And when you do that and you ask your subordinates for their input, and you ask for assistance from your superior, you're now getting help from two different sources.
Directions. Excellent, excellent advice. Wow. You have taught us a lot in a very short period of time. Thank you so much. So I want to ask you, how can people get in touch with you? I know your home base is in Colorado Springs, and how can people get in touch with you?
Well, yeah, I live up in the beautiful Rocky Mountains of Colorado. They can reach me on trainingfortherealworld.com. That's my webpage. And my email is pretty simple, aviationleo@gmail.com. And that's just an acronym for Aviation Law Enforcement Officer @gmail.com. And so either one of those are great, or you can find me on Facebook and in particular on LinkedIn.
Great.
And be more than happy to engage with you because, again, our people make us.
Yep.
We could not be successful without them.
And you can also reach LaPonda through the Center for Respectful Leadership because she sits on our advisory council. So there are many ways to reach LaPonda.
And I'm very excited about that because I think it's such a worthwhile endeavor, in particular in our world today.
Thank you so much for saying that. We think so too. And I would like to thank all of you for tuning in today. We hope you've enjoyed the session. I think we have learned a lot from LaPonda. And We are going to continue to have these sessions. We'll be interviewing many, many different thought leaders like LaPonda. And don't forget, our next CRL event is coming up on May 22nd at 9 a.m., where we're going to be gathering for what we call our Reclaiming Respect Solutions session. And LaPonda, you were part of that session last month, and it went really well. And we're doing it again this month, and we'll be doing it again on a monthly basis. So register on LinkedIn or our Facebook page, and we will see you there. Thank you, everyone, for joining us at the Center for Respectful Leadership. Bye now.